Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Thinking Out Loud, where we're dedicated to sharing the ancient Near Eastern context of the biblical authors. And hopefully, this is going live right now because I just had a problem with doing all this. But we're going to trust that the good Lord, He is over us. So, yep, we're going live. Just got the email. And we're dedicated to sharing the ancient Near Eastern context of the Bible because of our experience with this. I've studied this a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that this is the best or one of the best, if not the best, way to interpret the Bible. And I say that because it's like any context. If you think of any series that you guys have ever watched, oh, one thing I forgot. Sorry about that. Any series that you guys have ever watched, or any kind of content that you guys have been engaging with, it's really the best way to take that is in its own context. So with a series, if you just started on episode 11 or season 5 or whatever is in the middle, then you're going to miss a lot of the context. It's not that you won't be able to understand the storyline per se, because it has its own individual story, but the overarching a story that, what's going on in season 1, what's going on in season 2 and 3, and those kind of things. The same thing is with the Bible. And so you can pick out an individual book, let's say Esther, and you could understand that so well. But then if you would read the history of Israel, you get a lot more understanding. If you read how Israel was formed, you get a lot more understanding. And that's all the context. It's the worldview. It's what shaped the biblical author's outlook on the world. And we get that by looking at the biblical narrative in its context. And so this teaching is no different. This is Spiritual Beings Part 2. We're super excited about this. This is going to be quite a long mini-series. It's going to be multiple sessions, and I've tried to break them down a little bit for you guys. But the context for this is Spiritual Beings 1, which is in the larger context of what is the Bible's main character, which is set in the foundational series, What is the Bible? And so there's multiple contexts, as you can see here. And if you haven't gone through that material, please do so first by clicking the link there. Also in the description section of the video. And usually I put it in the comments, but this video got messed up a little bit, so it's not there right now. But you can go into the description section and you can click, and there's links for all this stuff there, so you can join us and follow along with us and enjoy this material. We're going to be going through the continuing the series on spiritual beings, and we're going to learn the way we always do that, teaching on this topic. I quote from scholarly sources in hopes that you guys would see that this isn't just my kooky point or my off the wall interpretation, that this scripture and that these ways that I'm interpreting this scripture is steeped in academia. And of course, I draw some of my own conclusions, but a lot of time I'm referring to these guys. And the two highly recommended resources, which you can get on our recommended resource, Faith Life Study Bible. It's an amazing resource. It's for free. Seriously, guys, I talk about this all the time, and I don't get anything for referring it to you. But on your iPad, on your phone, on your computer, you can use this resource to understand the Bible better, understand the ancient Near Eastern context better, guys. I'm telling you, it's free. Go get it. There's no reason you couldn't get it. It's in print. You'd have to pay for that, but just to download it, it's free. All the graphs, all the articles are right there at your fingertips. It's interactive. It links into Logos Bible software, and so you can get more resources and more information. It's an amazing resource. And then the second one is this Old Faithful NIV Cultural Background Study Bible. I love this thing. We'll be quoting from this today, and it's just such a good resource to have. It's my favorite resource for gaining a better understanding of ancient Near Eastern resource, and I know some of our viewers out there have purchased this resource for themselves, and they enjoy it as well. So let's get started. The Divine Council. This is what we talked about last week, guys. Our spiritual beings first teaching was basically all about the Divine Council. And how does God relate to other spiritual beings? Because God is the main character of the Bible, but then there's also two other main characters or characters that go throughout the whole Bible, and one of them is spiritual beings. And so, how does this divine counsel affect them? Last week we talked about the ancient Near Eastern view of God's residing in a council and how this idea was not abandoned by the Israelites but transformed. I'm going to make a quote from here to help jog our memories. This is out of the NIV Cultural Background Study Bible on the article on the divine counsel on page 615 if you have that resource. Quote, the idea that God's operating in a community, however, posed serious problems for the theology of Israel, in which only one being had divine authority. This theology did not eradicate the divine counsel from the Israelite thinking. Instead, the council was transformed. Rather than being comprised of various gods, the council featured the sons of God, over whom Yahweh presided and whose activities he delegated. These council members were not gods who had autonomous divine authority on par with Yahweh's, but they were spirit beings given a role in Yahweh's governance of the world. Love that quote again from the NIV Cultural Background Study Bible on the article The Divine Counsel on page 615, guys. If you have that, go there, look at it. That's just a little tiny quote out of I think the page, it might be one page or 2 pages. So in the biblical author's ancient Near Eastern worldview, Yahweh alone is sovereign over the other deities on his council. Again, I'll say it again. Yahweh alone is sovereign over the other deities that are on his council. We're not talking about a bunch of gods here jockeying for position as in a pantheon of, let's say, Greece or Rome. We define sovereignty not as meticulous control, so God's not meticulously controlling these beings to do whatever his will is, but that of the ability to rule as one pleases. And Yahweh has seen fit to rule not by control, but by sharing his authority with his council. And so last week we talked about that. God doesn't want to make everybody do everything or predestine every little minute mite and particle and whatever. Actually, nothing. He wants trust. He wants a relationship. And so that's his sovereignty, is the ability to rule as he pleases, and he sees fit to share his authority. So who is on the divine council? The divine council is made up of spiritual beings known in the biblical narrative as the sons of God, or the B'nai Elohim, which is the translation of the Hebrew, or is the Hebrew. B'nai Elohim, in the translation of that, is the son of gods. And this informs us that they're spiritual beings. All Elohim. Elohim is a name for God. All Elohim inhabit the spiritual realm, for they are spiritual beings. Here is a saying that I love and has helped me a ton to understand all this. All spiritual beings are Elohim. If you live in the spiritual realm, you're an Elohim, but no other Elohim is like Yahweh. There are many different members who are present on the council, all of which differ in role and status. One of the most important points we will cover today and throughout the spiritual beings teachings, I'll put that in there too, is that regardless of the role the spiritual being plays on the council, to remain in Yahweh's presence on his divine mountain, also known as his council, they must remain loyal to him alone. This is the prerequisite to serve on God's holy abode. Elohim. Elohim is used for all types of beings found on and off of Yahweh's council. Again, this is the general term for describing an inhabitant of the spiritual realm. Today, let's stick to only those who are found on God's service, in God's service on his council. All beings were created to inhabit God's holy mountain. Otherwise known as his abode or council, every Elohim was created to live in relationship with Yahweh, as he shares his authority with them to govern his creation. Each being is created with a purpose that brings honor to those whom perform their duties faithfully, and glory to the one who created them for that purpose. And so this is why God created. What does God want? We talked about this all the time. We didn't quote it today, but God wants a big blended family of spiritual beings and human beings that would rule, he would share his authority with, and that they would reign and rule with him as they bring his kingdom to the to creation order. And that's what we're talking about here. God is sharing his authority with these Elohim on the council. We're going to get into this a lot. There's direct quotes from the Bible where this happens, and he wants to share his authority and live in relationship with those who remain faithful, again, for his glory, and to bring glory to him through these beings. This, you guys can probably tell, there's a lot of echoes of the church in this, but that's because, guess what? The church takes these beings' place. Don't you know that we will stand in the place of angels and judge them? That's what Paul writes in the New Testament. To understand how the council operates a bit better, I have used this example from our modern day to help out. I've used this a lot in the church. I taught through this in the church, and when I was writing the Turkish book, I used this example. Think of God's council as his White House. For us in the U.S., that's pretty, you say the White House, everybody knows it, probably around the world, but you could also think of like probably Buckingham Palace if you're in the U.K., for our U.K. friends. The White House is the president. The White House is the President of the United States Command Center. Along with the president, you will find servants, press, landscapers, cleaners, military members, security, other leaders of nations in the White House. You cannot get close to nor enter the White House without permission. The closer you get to the president, the greater the status of the individuals surrounding him become. One cannot simply happen to come into the Oval Office by chance, for they will be met with force before they arrive. And Yahweh's counsel is a lot like this. This is a really rudimentary example, but just trying to give you guys some handholds of how this looks. And Yahweh's counsel looks like this. If we can run with this example of Yahweh's counsel being compared to the White House, his command center that he runs the cosmos from, then we can extrapolate the same conclusions we drew above. On Yahweh's council, we find servants, messengers, military, or leaders of the army, bodyguards, and leaders of nations, all of which are loyal to Yahweh, helping him govern creation by using his authority that he has shared with them. That's how it's supposed to work, right there. That's what's going on in the council, and for anybody who remains on that council, they are loyal, as we said above. Here's some biblical examples of the servant. Remember, all Elohim who occupy a place on God's council are servants to him. You need to be loyal to him. You need to have a place on the council and occupy this place. You are a servant to him, but you must be loyal. If they are found on the council, they have been faithful to his cause and are in Yahweh's servitude. Although all spiritual beings on the council are his servants, not all share the same status or role. Let's start looking at each one of the different roles which exist on God's mountain together. Now, we're just starting today. I want to keep this kind of short, hopefully around 20 minutes. But the first one we're going to look at here is cherubim and seraphim. And that's the only one we're going to look at today. And next time we'll look at some different ones. But the cherubim and seraphim, these are guards. They have multiple roles, actually. But they're guards. We see that for the first. These are guards. These are Yahweh's bodyguards or guardians. I know that might be a little tricky because, of course, Yahweh doesn't need to be protected. He's all powerful. These bodyguards, let's put it in quotes, bodyguards are more of a sign of power. Now, I don't have bodyguards because I'm just nobody, but any president, any important person you can think of, they have bodyguards. It's a symbol of power. So they They are there to these bodyguards or the cherubim or seraphim are there to denote Yahweh's sacred space. If you see these bad boys, you instantly know that you are in the presence of the living God. This happens all the time. They see these things and they freak out, and they fall on their face, and I'm not holy. It freaks people out. All these beings actually freak people out. They surround his throne and are continuously calling out, "Holy, holy, holy." That's separate, or in another word for it is other, other, other. This is because even though God isn't Elohim like all other Elohims, in that he is a spiritual being, there is no other Elohim like him. There's nothing else like him. He is holy, separate, other. So here's a quote from the Bible to just give you a little glimpse of this. This is from Isaiah 6, 1-6. In the year that I'll start over. Quote, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on the throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings, with 2 wings which covered their faces, with 2 wings which covered their feet, and with 2 wings they were flying. And they were calling to one another, 'Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory.' At the sound of their voices, the doorpost and the threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. 'Woe to me,' I cried, 'I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty.' Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hands, which he had taken with tongues from the altar. With it he touched my mouth and said, 'See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for.'" That's Isaiah 6, 1-6. And again, Isaiah is a sinner, and he's found in the presence of these bodyguards. He's freaking out. The temple's there. It's probably quite a sight to be held. And so he freaks out. And that's usually what happens when they come across these Elohim, anybody, even the lesser ranking ones, which we'll see in a couple weeks. More than 700 years later, probably more like 1,000, but 700 is fair. More than 700 years later, we see these same beings continuing in their service to Yahweh in John's Apocalypse. Quote, "In the center, around the throne, were 4 living creatures, and they were covered with eyes in front and in back. The first living creature was like a lion, the second was like an ox, the third had the face of a man, the fourth was like a flying eagle. Each of the 4 living creatures had 6 wings and was covered with eyes all around, even under its wings. Day and night they never stopped saying, 'Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was, who is, and who is to come.' Whenever the living creatures gave glory, honor, and thanks to him who sits on the throne and who lives forever and ever." That's the end of the quote. That's Revelation 4, 6-9. These spiritual beings are also used in Genesis to protect God's mountain, his holy abode, i.e. his council, from being invaded by those whom had been disloyal and whom's access to return denied. Let's see here. After he drove the man, here's a quote from Genesis 3:24. Sorry about that. It's quote, "After he drove the man out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim with a flaming sword back and forth to guard the way of the tree of life." Genesis 3:24. Here's another kind of bodyguard. If the president says stand in the door, don't let anybody in, well, they're not going to get in there. But they're also throne carriers. These spiritual beings are also responsible for transporting Yahweh's throne. For simplicity's sake, the Merkabah, the thing to ride in, or cart. We could go ahead and just say car, because in a modern, this is God's, in American slang, whip. This is his car. This is what he rides around in. This is how God transports himself, is God's heavenly chariot throne, the Merkabah. The cherubim and seraphim transport Yahweh's throne across the galaxy to his desired destination. Remember, wherever the president is located, his staff is with him, and so true is Yahweh. Wherever Yahweh is present, his counsel is there with him, transporting him. So here we go. Here's the quote for this. This is out of Psalm 18, 9, and 10. He parted the heavens and came down. Dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew, and he soared on the wings of the wind. I'm just going to bring some attention to this quote again, to some parts that I like a lot here. Dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew, and he soared on the wings of the wind. There's a method to my madness for sure. I know that this kind of seems like a weird way of probably teaching what is the Bible, but I'm trying to teach you guys also that the context is important, the ancient Near Eastern context. And why is that? There is a reason I have chose to teach What is the Bible series this way. And this is exactly it. Let us draw our attention to the detail that it is the visible Yahweh that we spend four or more teachings on, described with corporeal language, his feet, under his feet, who rides on the clouds. He's the cloud rider. We did a whole thing on cloud riding visible Yahweh. This passage is amazing and reinforces what we have previously covered in our teachings on what is the Bible's main characters. So again, we need to take all of this stuff in the context that we've been looking at it in. So on earth as in heaven, the important role these spiritual beings fill while surrounding God's throne on the heavenly mountain is the meaning behind the symbolic golden cherubim in the most holy place of the tabernacle and temple. As in heaven, so too on earth, that the visible Yahweh would appear between the cherubim in the most holy place once a year. Click on this link here to get that teaching. That's from the fourth visible Yahweh teaching. Before we bring this teaching to a close, I wanted to end with the differences between cherubim and seraphim. Both are the same in status and roles, but are different in appearance. While they share similarities such as multiple wings and humanoid hands, they both also differ from one another. The most striking of these differences comes from the etymology of the word seraphim in Hebrew. The word for seraphim is associated with the words for burn, fire, and serpent. A serpent that spits venom that burns is the concept behind the Bible's reference to the fiery serpents found in the desert surrounding Israel. And this is where seraphim comes from, all those words right there. Seraphim differ from that of the cherubim in the fact that their appearance is reptile in form, snake, serpent in form. And we quoted above, to Isaiah was the passage about a cherubim. No, a seraphim. It said the seraphim had these that covered his face, his feet, and he flew with some. And then John in Revelation, he describes these, and I think Ezekiel also, I'm pretty sure, I'll go back and look and put it in here if it's true, but Ezekiel, he actually does. He quotes, and when he talks about these things, it's the same. It's, the head of an ox, the head of a lion, the head of a lamb, of a man, and these are the cherubim. I'll put that back in here. I don't know what happened to it. I thought it was in here. It must have got erased or something. But the cherubim are this, the four faces. But the seraphim is reptilian. And so I think it's really striking. I'm coming off this teaching for a second, that you have the animal kingdom, domestic, wild. You have the bird kingdom. You have man kingdom. And then with the seraphim, you have the reptilian kingdom. And the most famous one of these, this reptilian form, seraphim, anointed guardian cherub is what he's called. The most famous one of these beings we will be covering in an upcoming installment of Critical Thinking Out Loud. I'm sure you are tracking with me, the serpent of old. And we'll get into that a lot in our teaching on that. So seraphim, so on his holy mountain, God lives in relationship with loyal spiritual beings while sharing his authority to govern creation. The cherubim and seraphim are only one class of many spiritual beings found in Yahweh's council. We will be covering all of these servants in detail in upcoming installments of Critical Thinking Out Loud. Now, we have this Bible Project, so check out these short videos on spiritual beings by our friends over at the Bible Project by clicking here. They're amazing. They go over the same stuff we're talking about. They're little 8-minute videos. They're super helpful. They're to better grasp what is being covered in this series, and they're beautifully done. They're amazing. And so we'll see you guys next time as we continue our study on spiritual beings as the Bible's main characters. And we want to remember that biblical doctrine derives from the biblical text. So when we say that, for example, something even as simple as what does sovereignty mean, we draw that from the text, not from tradition or anything like that. And so we just want to remind you guys of the citations we quoted from the NIV Cultural Background Study Bible out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, USA, Zondervan, 2016. And we just want to tell you guys a call for action. Help us by learning more. Check out this book, Angels, What the Bible Really Says About God's Heavenly Host by Michael Heiser for a more in-depth study on these spiritual beings who are on God's counsel. Get it by clicking there on the link. No extra cost to you, but it really helps out our ministry. And our favorite Bible, which is the NIV Cultural Background Study Bible, which we quoted out today. There's a link there. No extra cost to you, but it helps us out in our favorite book, Supernatural, again by Mike Heiser. What does the Bible teach about the unseen world and why it matters? And you get that at no extra cost, but it helps us out. And we just wanted to thank you guys for being with us. We're looking forward to next week when we're going to be covering our third part and looking at another couple of these guys. We'll be able to do a couple of them in one. But we're going to go through the whole council, and I'm looking forward to doing that next week with you. And just a quick update here at the end, if you would share these videos with people that you think would like them, we'd really appreciate that. But also, I'm going to have a guest teacher coming up when my baby boy is born at the end of the month. He's going to do a series on John, and especially a word study series on water in the book of John. So it's going to be really good, and his name's John. He's a really good friend. And so we're looking forward to that, and I will be keeping you guys posted on when that's going to happen. So really appreciate you guys. Love you guys, and thank you for joining us again on Critical Thinking Out Loud.